Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Andrew Westover, and I'm the Eleanor MacDonald Storza Deputy Director for Learning and Civic Engagement here at the High Museum of Art. Thank you for joining us for today's program on Rembrandt prints, which is generously supported by the Goodman Vigtel Works on Paper Fund. Established in 2008 in memory of Goodman Vigtel, the Goodman Vigtel Endowment Fund for Works on Paper provides the High Museum of Art with a stream of income to support our engagement with works on paper. Goodman Vigtel was the High's director for 28 years, overseeing its transformation from a modest regional institution to one of the nation's most successful art museums. We would particularly like to thank his wife, Carolyn Vigtel, who is here with us today, and honor Goodman's work advancing the High Museum of Art. A special thank you as well to High Museum members in attendance. Your support is invaluable and fuels our mission. If you are not yet a member of the museum or need to renew, please visit high.org at the end of this program. I, of course, encourage you as well to go see the exhibition, which is on display following this conversation, as your ticket to this panel includes admission to the museum as well. I'll now invite the High's esteemed curator, Claudia Einecke, to begin this program.
Thank you, Andrew, and good afternoon to all of you. If you don't know me, I'm Claudia Einecke. I'm the Francis B. Bunzl Family Curator of European Art here. And, I appreciate you joining us this afternoon for this, what I hope will be a very interesting conversation about Rembrandt and his printmaking. But before we turn to Rembrandt, I'd like to introduce the other star of this afternoon's program, Dr. Nadine Orenstein. She is the Drue Heinz Curator in charge of the Department of Drawings and Prints at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where she has been a curator since 1992. She received her doctorate from the Institute of Fine Arts at New York University, and has written and lectured extensively on 16th and 17th century prints and drawings, and in particular on Dutch and Flemish artists. Her most recent exhibition at the Met was entitled The Renaissance of Etching, and that was on view in 2019 to 2020, and actually won the IFPDA Foundation Book Award. It's wonderful. Her other shows have been about various Dutch and Flemish artists like Hercules Segers and Hendrik Goltzius and Peter Bruegel the Elder. So you can see why she was the perfect person to invite to talk about Rembrandt. One logistical note, if there's time after our conversation, we hope so, we will invite questions from the audience. And when that time comes, just raise your hand and a staff member will bring a microphone to you so that your question can be heard more easily. With that, without any further ado, join me in welcoming Dr. Orenstein.
Hello.
All right. Thank you for. Thank you. Yeah, it is on. Welcome, and thank you for being here this afternoon to help us come to grips some more or learn more about Rembrandt. Rembrandt, of course, undoubtedly and undisputedly one of the greats in the total history of Western art. Not only celebrated not only for his paintings, but also as really a master printmaker. And his etchings, have been and are still considered and admired as sort of the apex, one might say, or one of the high points of etching and printmaking, again in Western art. So Having said that, let me start with a sweeping question. So what is it about Rembrandt's prints that make them so great and special?
Yeah, well, I would say first that Rembrandt, I think printmaking held a very special place for Rembrandt as an artist. So while I think it's well known, well, his paintings are well known, it is also, I think, widely known that he had a big group of pupils and students around him who painted very much in his style. And so, a lot of scholarship has been done just trying to figure out what's been done by Rembrandt, what's been done by his pupils. The same can be said about his drawings. A lot of his drawings, his pupils drew in very close style to the master, and so there's a lot of discussion about what's by him, but what's by this student or that student. Printmaking, almost none of his pupils made prints. So what that tells me is that he did it at night, he did it somewhere else, he was doing it on his own, and it was something that was very personal to him. On the other hand, a print, just by its nature, is something that is spread and goes out to the market. And he was very conscious about, being able to sell his prints. That's pretty clear. Even during his lifetime, prints were available. We know they were with collectors in Italy. They were circulating throughout Europe. He became very famous, and I think especially through his prints. What's very interesting about Rembrandt as a printmaker is that he was really a painter who made prints. And so he wasn't trained as like a professional engraver. And if you go into the show in the exhibition here, you can see many works by people who really were professionals in that field, and they were trained, and they did very clean, sharp works. Rembrandt just he invented his style. So here we picked out two works which show sort of the range of what he does, and sometimes he treats the printing plate like a sketch. So he's drawing prints, so that's what you see with the three heads of the women, which is a work that's in the exhibition here, and it's really sketches, right? He's using the printing plate like a sketch pad, whereas the one on the other side, the three crosses, and this is the final state of the three crosses. All of the impressions of this print are very inky and rich, and he's leaving, we'll talk about it in a little while, how he leaves ink on the printing plate, and he's really painting the prints. So every impression of this print looks different. He's painting the printing plate. So that's sort of the two extremes. So he makes prints like these. I'm pointing this way because I can see the screen down here. He makes these landscapes very much as though he had gone out into the landscape and was quickly sketching in the surroundings of Amsterdam. And he does many drawings that look very similar to this.
And maybe just very quickly, we don't... for anybody who doesn't exactly know how an etching is made, it's very, in some ways, similar to drawing, the way you make the lines. But so you have a very smooth copper plate, usually polished, and it's covered with some waxy rosin kind of material. And then you take a sharp stick, a sharp instrument, and you can scratch into the waxy part. And of course, where you scratch, the copper is now visible, is exposed. Then you take this plate and dunk it into acid. I'm very simplifying, of course. And where the wax has been removed, the acid bites into the metal plate, makes grooves. And then when you've done your design, and because it's waxy, it can be relatively easily manipulated and drawn into. So when you've done your design, you clean off the waxy stuff, and then you put ink on the plate so that it goes into those grooves, and everything, the excess is wiped off, and then you print from there. So all the grooves that were bitten by the acid print, make up the print. So, but because the wax is relatively soft, it allows you to draw relatively smoothly like a drawing on paper.
Yeah, and then one other thing that you can see in the print on the right is that he also kind of took a very sharp tool and scratched directly into the copper plate to make, with a technique called dry point, which makes these sort of, if you look in the bottom left, there's kind of a dark velvety area, and he uses this all the time. It's called dry point burr, and he uses that to create kind of a darker effect. But you can see in that same print how really spare his line work is. There's very little cross-hatching or shading. It's really just a pure line. Whereas this print, his famous print, The Three Trees, is a very different story. And it's actually the only one of his landscapes that's really worked up to dramatic effect. And hopefully you can see the difference between the ones we were just looking at and this one, where it's like he's really hatching and there's a lot of shading. And part of the reason I think he did it this way is because he was reusing a printing plate. So if you look at the clouds in the sky on the left, that's actually leftovers from an earlier printing plate. We know which one it was, the Death of the Virgin. And he like cut the plate down, he flipped it to the side, and then, you know, typical Rembrandt is like, oh, I'm not going to get rid of everything on this plate. Let's leave the drapery from the Virgin's bed, and we're going to make it into clouds, and that's what he did.
Yeah, because I mean, as I explained, making a mark, but you know, if once you've created a plate, you can also go back and polish out some of those grooves that you had made before, some of those lines that you had made before, and make changes to the whole composition or reuse something. So you erase basically, and you decide how much you want to erase and how much you want to.
But it's hard to do.
Yeah,
too.
well,
Yeah.
exactly. I make it.
You can
sound
see
like
why he wouldn't want to. He didn't do everything.
Right.
But this, I love this print because you can see, like, he typical of Rembrandt, he goes well into the distance. There's just details that you can see all the way into the background, little farmers and cows in the fields, and really incredible. Also, you know, very hard to show weather, and you really feel like the wind, you know, the rain is coming down and the wind is blowing, which for anyone who's been to Holland will recognize this weather exactly because it's like that all the time. Yeah.
And then we have some other examples, I mean, landscapes, but also figures. I mean, you can see how very elaborate and extensive his drawings on a piece of copper can be.
Yeah, and these are both in the exhibition, so it's worth having a good look at them afterwards. And also here on the right, where the Holy Family, they're bringing Christ back from the temple, you can see this very rich burr that he gets all over the plate. All this, like these very dark velvety areas are his just drawing with a sharp tool straight onto the printing plate. So whether it's religious subject or landscape, he has I think he was someone who was just constantly drawing and people, and you can see if you go back to the you know, you can see like one thing that's so wonderful about him is he captures kind of like these moments between family and parents and children, and it's because he was constantly looking at people and drawing them. So if you go to the next slide, these are just like a couple of drawings by Rembrandt, but you can see on the left, like all of these scenes that he's constantly making of people on the street, people in his home. You know, on the bottom is his wife Saskia, who was in bed. She was sick for a very long time, but also she was having children, and so there are a lot of images of her that's in the house, her in bed with a kind of nursemaid there. But you can also see these images of the mother and the child, or the nurse and the child, or the child. Isn't that one being frightened by the dog? Yeah, this like little, you know. So he's always like looking at people and how they react. And then on the bottom right are two drawings that are in the Met of this woman who's being hung. And you think like, you know, why is he drawing that of all scenes? But, you know, if you're going to do a crucifixion, you got to know like how a body hangs, and where else do you do that except going to see someone who's actually being hung?
Yeah. Well, Well, so that's more the drawing kind of aspect of Rembrandt's printmaking, or where the prints look like line drawings or close to line drawings. What about that other approach when you said that you also approached printmaking like a painting, like paintings?
Yeah, well, I chose these three prints that are very early. They're self-portraits, or they're just using himself as a model more than it being a self-portrait. But what they each show is from very early on, he was fascinated certainly with light and dark, chiaroscuro, but also this idea of how do you, printmaking is a black and white medium, at least in those days. That was really, they were just printing black ink on white paper. But how do you get light to come out of the shadows? So you can see in each one of these, he's got the face like mostly in the dark. And how do you show like an eye when really you're in very dark shadow? So it's something that fascinated him throughout his career, but you really see it early on where he's puzzling this out, and each one of these things, and he does many of them, it's like, okay, like I put half of the face in shadow, how do I get the eyes to show up? How do I get the, like any texture in the face? And he keeps puzzling through it, and it's fascinating to see. So that, by the 1630s, 1640s, 50s, he's still working on this idea. So there's another self-portrait from, 10 years later, maybe, where now he's figured it out a bit, right? Now you can see the eyes in this dark shadow, but he's still, it's a weird thing to make a face that's all in shadow. Yeah. Who does that? But it's clearly a puzzle for him. And then in this beautiful print of the shell, which you can see up in the exhibition, it's not a face, but it's an object. But he's doing the same thing. It's like, here I have this object on a dark shelf. How do I make it come out? Where does the light hit? And by the time he gets to the 1650s, he's more interested in, okay, I know how to make light and dark. How do I get the light to hit so it creates the form? And what's interesting is in the show, if you go look at the wall where this print is, next to it there's a little painting with shells, and you can see how differently the items are lit in the painting, and then you really see what Rembrandt's trying to do in the print.
Yeah, I think with this one in particular, you feel, it's not only perfectly three-dimensional and is in your own space, but it actually seems to be moving out of the darkness towards you. It really has a dynamic that you don't see, not in every painting either, but it's really an amazing, one of my favorite pieces, absolutely.
And it's very subtle, because you can see the rims, these repeated rims, circular rims. He's got light just in a certain part, and then you see the cone of the shell, and then there's another little just hint of light hitting the end of it.
Yeah,
and so he's really thinking about how does light hit things in different ways. And then when he gets to these two prints, so the one on the left is of his friend Jan Six, who is a patron, and it's here's this man sitting reading at a window, light coming from behind now, but the puzzle of this print is really how does the light hit all of these objects in the room? And now the whole room is completely dark, but there's like a little, the frame comes out, there's a sword on the chair over on the left, and just the hilt of the sword is showing. And then like every object, he's thinking about if the light is just coming from that window, the head is all in bright light, but how about everything else in the room, and how do I pick it out from a room that's completely dark otherwise? And that, I think, is so interesting. And the same thing with the print that's in the exhibition on the right, the Abraham Franken, same puzzle. And how do he lights the edge of the frame, and he lights some of the works on the table, and it's again that same idea. So it's interesting to see him sort of puzzling this out through his whole career.
And the question of light and how to manipulate or create the appearance of light is tied in with the desire to recreate or indicate different textures as well, because different textures reflect light in a different way. Something shiny, has a different light reflected than if you have a piece of velvet reflecting. And I mean, that's why, my training as an art historian was pretty much about painting and some sculpture and, a little bit of printmaking, but not a lot. And I must say, the more I have learned over the years about prints, and the more prints I see, and I really love when you have a master like Rembrandt and others, the ability to create so much variation in tonalities, in colors, quote unquote, because it is only black and white, but how many colors, how many different shades a real master can create. That's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, and that's why he was, so influential long after he died, because printmakers are always fascinated, and artists in general are fascinated by this.
Yeah, my background is more the 19th century, and there was, in the sort of middle of the 19th century, an etching revival in European art. Etching had sort of fallen a little bit out of favor, or had become sort of a commercial, used for commercial enterprises, reproductions, and so on and so forth. And there were artists who, inspired by and out of their admiration for a model like Rembrandt, really went back to this traditional way of, and using it in very artistic and sophisticated ways. And one of my favorites, sorry, I'm digressing to my area, Edgar Degas, whom we think of as the impressionist, the painter of dancers. But he also was an amazing printmaker, and his etchings, breathtaking. Mm-hmm. Pay attention sometime when you can, look him up.
And he copied Rembrandt quite a lot.
Yeah, and
he was fascinated by him.
Yeah, not only being inspired and emulating him, but copying, because I guess through copying that's the best way of learning how the other artist did that. Yeah. All right.
So I'd say here is where he takes it to the nth degree. And here, the scene is completely dark. There's a fabulous print in our collection. The slide doesn't do justice to it. But here, it's a scene of the adoration of the shepherds, Christ and Joseph, Mary and the baby and Joseph are over on the side. Joseph is reading. He's got he's lit by a candle that's behind him. And then the only other source of light is that little lantern held in the center by one of the shepherds. And so what I find wonderful about this, so there's two sources of light, and so he's figuring out what gets lit by these different sources. And then on the back, just the faces of these shepherds, each one is lit less and less as you go back. And then if you move the little pointer up, there's just the tip of the nose of one of these shepherds. And the way he does it, he puts a lot of ink. He makes this a very inky print, and then he takes his little cloth and wipes away little bits of the ink, so it comes up very bright. And I love just like a little highlight on the tip of the nose, because that's from that far back is the only thing that's catching the light. And it's I think it's just wonderful.
But I mean, what's also so interesting, and we'll see it in all the other prints that we have looked at and still will look at, but the effect, because what I've described and how to make an etching was very primitive and just lines, but obviously there's a lot more that can be done than drawing lines, and how Rembrandt is so interested in this type of work, in creating a mood, and it's not just, here's a figure and there's a figure and there's a chair and there's whatever, a lantern, but really creating something evocative and a whole atmosphere, which is of course also what he did in painting so extremely well.
And even just this interest in sort of dramatic lighting and chiaroscuro goes back to his very earliest paintings and to his teacher, Peter Lostmann, and I noticed in the museum here you have a beautiful Lostmann that's just been cleaned, and that was Rembrandt's teacher, who created these very different kinds of paintings, but with like incredible dramatic, sort of theatrical lighting, especially, and that's something Rembrandt picked up a taste for that right away.
Now, I guess. Well, again, for another way that he emulated or tried to create effects that we usually associate with painting, so I've described linear, to make the lines for etching. But that's not where the process ends, because then you can also do a lot of things with different ways of inking the plate. I've described you ink it and wipe off the excess so that only the lines print. But what happens if you leave just a tiny film of ink all over the plate? Don't wipe it completely clean. And I think that's what we see he exploited that possibility and option as well tremendously.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about Rembrandt, again, is he was working in Amsterdam, which was really the center of printmaking for Europe at that time. And so people around him were creating these very professional looking, cleanly wiped prints. And here he was, like doing his own thing, and it must have been very unusual looking, especially in his own day, because that was not the kind of printmaking anybody else was doing at all. Printmaking was not what it is today, this very creative, free medium. It was the way you circulate news. It was the way you get out, biblical stories. It was like very clear what it was about. And then here's Rembrandt doing like really different things. So here he decides to leave ink on the plate, and then he's really using a printing plate like it was a canvas. So on the left is an impression of this flight into Egypt, cleanly wiped. So this is what the printing plate looked like. It was all just lines, and you can see the lines have been straight inked. On the right is an impression in art department where he's left a film of ink on the printing plate. And then he goes over and he starts with his cloth wiping off the areas that he wants to be a little bit lighter. So you can see, in contrast to the one on the left, he's making, the background's very dark now. Again, this lantern is the main source of light, and he's figuring out, Joseph is going to be better lit because he's next to the lantern. Mary, the Virgin, on the ass, she's more in the shadow because she's further back. And then what I love about our impression is that on that lantern, he like really wiped off the faces of the lantern, because that's the bright light coming from the lantern. And if you look carefully, I don't know if you can see it in the slide, but certainly in person, you can see that this lantern is very bright compared to all the other things in the thing. But he's, again, like puzzling this idea. But then what's amazing about this print is that he makes like every single impression of this print look completely different. So every single one, and this is the way he thought generally, you can tell, why do I have to do one that looks just like the other one? Like, why don't I do every single one slightly different and keep rethinking, like, what if I put everybody in the dark and just do the heads in the light? What if I do everything in the dark and then put light coming from the background? What if I do, and every single one is different? And this, now, because everyone has great digital images, you can actually show all of the different versions of the print. And so he's really making individual paintings, and yeah.
Yeah, no, and I was just going to say, we say with prints, with etchings and engravings and so on, we call them multiples. They're multiple originals because, it's all from the same print, from the same plate, just printed several times, but they're all originals. You almost can't talk of multiples with Rembrandt because in a case like this, where each and every one was individually manipulated, was individually inked, and the ink was done in a specific way. And it's not just, okay, I make 10 prints of this, it's 10 times an individual print. The composition is the same, but each work is unique.
Yeah, and that was, well, I should say, first of all, they didn't edition prints in those days like they do now. So now, if you're a printmaker, you say, I'm going to make 50, and every single one is going to be the same. You number them, and everyone knows they're getting exactly the same print. In those days, that wasn't even a concept. So, you would, if you were just a professional printmaker, you'd have a printing plate, you'd run off a few impressions. Oh, it's selling well. Run off a few more because the market wants it, and Rembrandt, same thing. He made some landscapes in the 1640s and then reprinted them in the 1650s when he was making more landscapes. So clearly he saw that people were interested and was going to sell them. So already that wasn't a concept, but this is like highly unusual. However, it wasn't Rembrandt's unique idea. So he was very influenced by an artist, much less known, called Hercules Sagers, who was working who was a little older than Rembrandt, was working a little bit before him, and was an artist who was like completely idiosyncratic. We did an exhibition at the Met and in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam about his work, and he was someone who was like doing exactly this, but he was like, this was his thing. He was taking one print and painting them differently and printing them in different colors and really, like, in a certain way, much more experimental than Rembrandt ever was.
I didn't know that. I have to look him up as well.
He's a really interesting character.
And we have another way that Rembrandt really, he was always looking apparently for different ways of achieving different effects with the same composition, but by manipulating other things like the inks, and in this case, even thinking about what effects different papers make. I mean, what different, they have.
Yeah, so on the right is like the beautiful impression of this portrait of Jan Lutma, the goldsmith, that's up in the exhibition here. On the left is the impression that we have in our collection at the Met, and the one on the left is printed on what we call Japan paper, which is kind of it's from the Far East. He was clearly like running down to the boats and ships that were coming in from the Far East and getting this paper delivered to him. Nobody else used this paper in that period, but he was fascinated by it because it wasn't. It had a sort of golden glow, as you can see, but also it's not as absorbent as a regular white paper. So the ink kind of hovers on the surface more than it sinks in more to the paper in the regular white paper made out of cotton rags and things like that. He also printed on vellum, which is animal skin, parchment, same thing. It doesn't absorb the ink in the same way, and I think he liked that because he was using dry point, that very velvety burr that he liked, and that really heightens the burr and these dark and light effects that he was so interested in. So, and especially in this print, using a different kind of paper with a different kind of light changes the kind of day, the time of day it might be. So on the right, it looks like it's sort of getting dark. It's a kind of grayish, whereas on the left, this Japan paper gives a golden glow. It feels like it's a different time of day, or maybe the weather is different, and he was sort of fascinated to see how different kinds of paper supports change the character of the print.
I mean, it's interesting, to think. I've sometimes wondered about when you look at the body of work of an artist and you see different styles, different appearances. Like in the case of Rembrandt, you have these etchings that are very linear, like a pencil drawing on the one extreme, and on the other extreme, these very elaborate atmospheric, light-filled or shadow-filled rooms. And when I see different styles like this in somebody's work, I think, oh, maybe that's what he did when he was younger, and then he switched and did, changed his style this way and changed his style later on again. And clearly, that's the wrong kind of thinking with Rembrandt, because he practiced all these different approaches at the same time, depending on what kind of effect he wanted to achieve. So I find that amazing. Yeah. Although, as an art historian or an amateur when it comes to printing, it's like, oh, but how can I tell which decade this belongs to when he's doing the same thing in different decades all the time?
Yeah. Well, luckily he dates almost everything, so
okay,
that's how you can tell.
Good. I'm glad about that. So there's one other thing that I want us to talk about, and that is the question of states for etchings, for engravings. Again, it has to do with how these etchings are made. So as I said already, that you can make a design and then you can print it off, and then you see, oh, I want to add something to it, or I want to erase something. So you can make more grooves, you cover it again with wax, and you make more design, or you polish out things that you have engraved or is engraved in the plate already. But you really don't see, that's the difference between a drawing, well, one of the differences between a drawing and making an etching. Yes, the movements on the plate might be similar, but when you make a drawing with a pencil or ink or whatever, you immediately see what the overall effect is, what the whole thing looks like. Well, when you have it on a piece of copper, you don't really see what the print looks like in the end. So you have to make an impression. You have to print it once to see, oh, what is the outcome? And that's when you realize, oh, I need to add more here, I need to subtract more. And so then you do that, and you make another print, which is now the same composition, but enlarged or changed in one way or another. And you make an impression, and you say, oh, I still think I need to do this, that, and the other. And you make another. And each one of those intermediary prints we call states. And in a way, I'm thinking of it, and I think that's correct, that artists make different states, working through different parts, step by step, to come in the end to some kind of what they think is the final perfect. That's what I had in mind. That's what it should be like. So, and I wonder if that's the same with Rembrandt, and also even if is some kind of consistency with what he might have considered the good final version.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting question, and we put up these images just to show how there is no final version necessarily with Rembrandt. So he is someone who was just always thinking, rethinking, and you can see that in his paintings, except not as clearly as with the states, but when they do x-rays of the paintings, they always see that he makes, changes the hats and changes makes lots of changes as he goes through making a painting. The thing about all these states that you can print out in a print is that you can sort of look over the artist's shoulder and see him as he's working, and because he's preserved all of those stages, whereas in a painting, those things get all covered up. And also, artists before Rembrandt really didn't keep all the state changes. You would do something, and it was workshop product, throw it away.
Like a draft that you discard.
He saw the market value of selling these things, and so he doesn't just print one of early states. He prints several impressions, which there was a certain moment where clearly people wanted all the different states of a certain Rembrandt print. And there's the Ephraim Buono portrait up in the exhibition. Well, they're the ones where the ring is white, and they're ones with the ring is black because there's so much burr on them, and people wanted both kinds of impressions. And so it's clear, like, people knew that he was doing this by the end of his career. But these are very early prints. What you can see is he takes this one portrait that's said to be the portrait of his father. I think he probably was reusing this printing plate because there's that weird blob on the left, which maybe is covering something up that was in the printing plate before. The second state, which is the one in the middle on the top, he signs it in the upper, on the bottom margin. He signs it, and so then you would say when someone signs something, it's finished. However, then he decides, you know what, I'm going to cut out that blob, and he cuts the whole printing plate down. He works on it some more. Then you go down to the bottom left, still working on it, and then he signs it again. So then you'd say, okay, that's finished. That is the end of that plate. Then he keeps working on it, and he adds the background, all that hatching in the background, because as you're printing a printing plate, the lines start to wear down. So, he reworks it because he sees like the plate's not as strong anymore. And then, so he keeps going a few more states. So, that's not usual. But he's someone who's just like, okay, I did that. What else can I do? How can I keep changing this or reworking this? And that's what's so interesting about him.
And really, you already alluded to it, but the idea of he's aware of the market. So, we sometimes have this sort of romantic idea that an artist, they have to be, starving and poor and struggling and so on. He was. But also, they're not supposed to think about money because it's all about the art. Of course, that's all nonsense because everybody needs to eat and live. But yeah, so the awareness of the market, and that's really. He basically created that market though with his work. I mean, that's so interesting that before that, because artists didn't do it before him, and suddenly we have something very different.
Well, he's interesting because he became very famous in his time. He makes so many self-portraits. It's almost like he's marketing himself. I mean, in a certain way, he created his sort of fame, and then he's playing into it, and he knows there are people who want that, and he has like a certain, people knew what they were getting with him in a certain way. Not always, he didn't always do what everybody wanted, but he knew people would buy what he did. So here's sort of the most famous example of his like constantly reworking a printing plate. So on the left is the early state of what we call the three crosses. So it's Christ crucified between the two thieves. And I believe it's our impression that's printed on vellum. So it's printed on parchment. Very wonderful inky print where he left ink on both edges of the printing plate. You can see how dark and lush it is. But the center part, you can see how sketchy it is. Over, if you do like to the right of the cross, the figures there are almost like stick figures. They're just outlines because they're supposed to be bathed in very bright light. But you understand it's Mary who's fainted, and people are running over to her, and the emotion that's in there, but just out of figures that are totally just line. And that comes from his like sketching people all the time. So then when it comes to doing something like that, in almost no lines directly on the printing plate, he knows how people comport themselves in different kinds of situations, and he's just able to relate that in the briefest of ways. And then, so that's the early state of the three crosses. He finishes the printing plate, he signs it in the third state. It looks very much like this. And then, I think he must have, there are a lot of impressions of that just on regular white paper, inked, not fancy inking or anything. So I think he probably gave, my personal idea is he gave it to a printer nearby and said, run me off, 50 of these. Then he gets the plate back, and then he changes it completely. So as you were saying, Claudia, he wipes out pretty much all of the figures in the front, and you can see he totally changes the whole scene. And he actually, if you look at the print up close in person, you can see he even changed the face of Christ. So on the left, in the first state, Christ is dead. On the right, actually his eyes are a little bit open and his mouth is a little bit open, and it's a different moment in the scene. And that's very typical of Rembrandt. It's like, you take a biblical story and how many, and he would tell his students also, just practice, what different moments, how do you show it differently each time? And that's exactly what he's doing here. So he took out most of the figures in the front. He has he changed a lot of the figures, and then he makes it very dark. This is the moment, darkness falls on the earth, and so there's just made it dark, and this is actually one of the lighter impressions of this print. Sometimes you see it almost completely inked up, completely dark. And so, it's this is his most famous, biggest, one of his largest late prints, and it's just amazing. He's one of these artists who, at a certain point you go, oh, Rembrandt, we've seen so much of him, and then you look at it and go, oh my God, he's so good.
Well, it's a question we had not talked about before, but is there, in terms of the, let's say, popularity or perhaps the evaluation or assessment by professionals, is there a consensus of are earlier states preferred, because they might be clearer and more linear, or do most people say, oh no, it's those really dramatic ones that we think are the really great creations? I suppose, while I'm asking that, I suppose it has to do with personal taste, of course. I mean, do you like drama, or do you like something more, simple? But is there... I mean, as a curator, I know we're not really supposed to talk about value, but of course, I mean, since we're talking about the market, obviously, the condition, the kind of paper, I'm sure it all affects the real, even dollar value, but I was thinking more of the intellectual.
Yeah, I mean, we should say that Rembrandt's prints were printed well after he died. They're still around, and still sometimes people are printing them. So the thing about the states is it tells us, we know if something's a fourth state and something's a first state is earlier than the fourth state. If something's a 15th state, you got to wonder whether it was done long after he died, and then, of course, the value is much less than the early states. I mean, what you're talking about, each print is a whole different case. So sometimes, it's between these two, I like them both for different reasons. I think a lot of people like the fourth state because it's very much to a contemporary eye. It's very abstract almost. It's very modern looking, compared to the first state, which is more narrative, right? It's whereas the one on the right is very, abstract and very, I don't know what to call it, expressionistic almost.
Yeah, emotive, yeah.
And I'm sure German expressionists were looking at that very carefully. But so sometimes his early states are a little more narrative than the other ones, but sometimes I kind of like that. There's another famous print, the Ecce Homo, which the first states, the early states, have a wonderful, it's Christ being presented to the people, but there's this band of just all kinds of people standing there looking at the scene that's going on above them. And there's a mother and child, there's just people looking everywhere. And I love that, because every time I look at the print, I see more people that I missed the last time. And then he takes them all out in the fourth state and redoes the whole plate, and for something very different.
That's amazing. Well, actually, I wish I had stopped on your what's the word, praise, a description of this particular print and how great and amazing it is, and not gone into the commercial world with our last question. But so I think in any case, let's take this as a place to stop. I believe we do have time for some questions. And anyway, thank you, Nadine, for everything.
Thank you all very much. We do
just one more thing. Plug for the exhibition. So the exhibition Dutch Art in a Global Age has 14 or 16, I can't remember, Rembrandt etchings in it and other etchings by other people. And if you haven't looked, or go look again if you have, it's worth looking close up and in person rather than, on the screen like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Perfect. We do have some time for some questions. If you would like to ask one, please raise your hand and I will bring the mic over to you.
Thank you so much for this. This was fascinating. I'm just curious about whether it was known to Rembrandt's contemporaries and the people who patronized him that he was doing all of these different versions, all of these different stages, and they held them together at the outset, or if it was scholars who noticed that there were all these different versions floating around and assembled them.
No, people at the time knew. And so the idea was, we know people wanted to collect all the states. It's like, collect them all. I mean, clearly people knew at the time what he was doing, and they wanted more than one. That's pretty clear. And then one interesting thing is later, what is interesting is when you have states of other kinds of prints, more professional kinds of prints, they could be biblical stories or anything, a print publisher would come along and put his name, we call it the publisher's address, down at the bottom in the corner, and then you'd know where you could buy the print, you knew who produced the print, and then when the plate would be sold to a different publisher, they'd take out that person's name, put their own name, the next publisher would put his name on it. Rembrandt's prints, we know they went to other publishers after he died, but no one ever puts their name on his prints, which is really interesting. However, there is a scholar in Poland, he figured out that there's a couple of prints where you see two little dots that show up in the corner, and he thinks that is a later publisher's indication of, like, these are the impressions I made. It was interesting, but no one puts their name. So these were clearly Rembrandt's prints, long after he died, had a very different kind of feeling or role than other kinds of prints of the time.
Yeah, certainly treated with more respect than most. Yeah, that's interesting.
Wonderful.
Well, is inking universal? I would think that it would be varied by whomever was putting ink on the plate.
You have to put ink on the plate, but what printmakers do is they wipe off all the ink on the surface of the plate. So the ink is in the lines, but there's no ink on the surface. So that's what we call cleanly wiped. So that's a regular kind of print. So what he's doing, at least for his time, was very unusual to leave ink on the printing plate, because then every time you print it, you have to re-ink the plate, so each impression turns out differently, because you can't do that the same way every time. So if you're making a print now and you're running an edition, you're not going to ink the plate in that sort of artistic way, because you're not going to get all your prints to come out exactly the same.
Would you please pass this down?
Hi. I was wondering, did he experiment with different types of ink, or were there different types of ink? Because I saw the paper differences, but I didn't know if he experimented with different types of ink, or what was the ink made from?
People always ask this, and I should have the answer. But I can't remember what he made the ink from exactly. But he didn't. I don't think there were different kinds of inks. There was pretty much one kind of ink. On very rare occasions, you see people using colors. Very unusual. So Hercules Sagers, who he was clearly inspired by, whose work he saw, he used all different color inks, and he would paint prints different colors. Rembrandt, in a certain way, he was a little more traditional. He stuck to black and white, and that's interesting in itself. But yeah, they didn't really experiment with inks so much, or there wasn't so much you could do with them. Here.
I was wondering about his eyesight. Was he nearsighted, farsighted?
I don't know.
Did he wear glasses at the end of his life?
The one document we don't have is his prescription from his ophthalmologist, I guess. We don't know. I mean, I think he was okay.
I was just wondering.
But he lived a very long life, so one assumes his eyesight. But you don't really, there's nothing where you really feel like he can't see well.
Right. I just wondered why he could see so incredibly well.
Yeah. But they did have magnifying glasses in those days, so I'm sure. There were some questions out front here.
Thank you. I'll bring it back around.
This is very, very interesting. I wanted to ask you if you could clarify the difference between states and proofs. But I have a second question, I'm wondering, so he's very innovative. He is exploring different papers, different ways of preparing his plate and printing it, which seems maybe, I would think, to go against what was normally accepted as the way a print ought to be, very clean and precise. Do you know if there was a discussion in his lifetime about the way he was sort of breaking the rules, like so many other artists have before him, or after him, have also experienced that kind of dialogue?
Well, I would say for your first question, proofs are just a kind of state, really. It's like and we kind of have the idea, like if the print isn't signed, it's a proof state. But once the print is signed, it's not so much a proof anymore. But proofs are sort of the thing that an artist does as they're working, and they take impressions. They're not finished yet, and they're still working. But there was no, I think now there's a more clear idea. These are the proof states. Print is finished. Now we're editioning the print. Whereas in his day, none of those concepts existed. So to call something a proof is a little bit kind of like a later idea. He was just pulling things, and then he signed it, then he made some more, then he signed it again, and I don't know. He didn't have that same idea. And then, I think he was always considered like, someone who was breaking the rules and doing things his own way and sort of argumentative. And, he wasn't the nicest person, clearly. That was sort of his reputation. But there's no discussion really about his being, a rule breaker. But you can see you can see he's popular because he's doing things very differently than anybody else, and that was very much appreciated at a certain moment when he was working, maybe less so as he got older and the tastes for certainly his paintings were changing. But at the beginning, clearly people liked that, doing something very different than everybody else. Yeah, over here. It's very rare that his paintings look exactly like his prints. There was a moment early on where he, because if you look at an artist like Rubens, who is sort of his great predecessor, who he clearly knew about, Rubens became very famous all around Europe because he was a great painter, but he had a workshop of people making prints that were sort of reproductions of his paintings, and those were circulated all around Europe. That's how people knew him everywhere, and and then I'm sure he got commissions that way. So Rembrandt, early on, you can see he's like looking at Rubens. He gets a printmaker to help him make a reproduction of his print of 2 of his paintings, or 3 of his paintings, and none of them are very successful. It's clear this is not his thing. He has to make original work. and otherwise he's not happy. So even when he makes a reproduction of his painting, he starts adding different details and changing things, but one of them comes out a complete wreck. He has to do the whole thing over again, and you can tell like he's not happy doing this. And then once he's done with those, he does them right like a period of 2 or 3 years, and it's like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm doing what I want, and then you see a whole different person come out. That's interesting.
Well, if I may just interject, but I mean, we still suffer from this idea that, well, painting is better, is higher in the hierarchy of artistic production than prints. And clearly with great artists like Rembrandt who say, no, the prints are not something sort of that I do on the side. It's just as important as my paintings.
Yeah, it's like, what can I do with this medium that I'm not doing with the paintings?
Yeah.
And that's, it's interesting. He does similar things, but he's doing them in its own way. I mean, someone like Jasper Johns is an artist like that who really understands, like, you can do this in print, you can do this in drawing, and you do this in painting, and it's different things. And that's very much the way Rembrandt thought.
Did Rembrandt travel much? Did he get out of town? Was he exposed to the great masters of Italy? What were his inspirations, and who were the artists who motivated and inspired him? I know he competed with Rubens.
Yeah, so Rembrandt is famous as a young artist for when it was suggested to him that he should go down to Italy with his studio mate, Jan Lievens. The two of them said, no, we don't want to go to Italy. We know everything is here in Holland. We don't have to do that. But Rembrandt was someone who was well aware of everything that came before him because he had a big art collection, prints, he had some paintings, sculpture. I mean, he went bankrupt because he spent so much money collecting things. And if you go to the Rembrandt house today in Amsterdam, they sort of evoke what his collection was like. But it's very clear, one of the things that I find really interesting is when you can see the sources of things that he was looking at. And you find them in everything he does. So I'm sure, like, he had an idea, I'm going to do Virgin and Child. He goes and looks at, what Albrecht Dürer did, what Lucas van Leyden did, all the artists who came before him, and he had albums of prints by all these people. And the reason we know that is because when he went bankrupt, they had to make an inventory of his house. And you can see he had, this artist Hercules Sagers, who was a big inspiration for him. He had 9 paintings by Hercules Sagers. He probably had a load of prints that weren't even listed there. And then he had a huge amount of other things, prints by Parmigianino, books of drawings, paintings by all kinds of artists, and he was just looking, and then he goes to auctions that are taking place in Amsterdam, and we know he makes drawings of things that he sees there, a famous portrait by Raphael. He knows very clearly what came before, and he's like, not only am I going to look at it, but I'm going to do better.
Well, maybe this is the time to call it quits then, and because we could go on forever, but we can't. Thank you very much for your interest, and of course, thank you, Nadine. Absolutely.
Thank you.